The silence in Judge Rebecca Hartwell's courtroom was deafening. It was the kind of oppressive quiet that made everyone hyper-aware of their own breathing, the rustle of expensive suits, and the distant hum of Manhattan traffic 30 floors below. Marcus Sterling adjusted his platinum cufflinks for the third time in 5 minutes, his jaw clenched so tightly it could crack diamonds. He was a man accustomed to control. At 35, he had built Sterling Dynamics from a basement, startup into a tech empire worth billions. His sharp features and steel-gray eyes had graced magazine covers, his signature on contracts that moved mountains and reshaped industries. But today, sitting at the defendant's table flanked by his army of lawyers, he felt like a fraud. The plaintiff's chair sat empty. Victoria Ashworth, his wife of 4 years, 7 months pregnant with his child, and the woman currently seeking to claim half his empire, was nowhere to be found. The absence of her presence was more powerful than any argument she could have made. Her chair seemed to mock him, a silent accusation that grew heavier with each passing minute. Mr. Brennan. Judge Hartwell's voice cut through the tension like a blade. Her reputation for punctuality was legendary, matched only by her intolerance for courtroom theatrics. It's now 9:47 a.m. Do you have any explanation for your client's absence? Thomas Brennan, Victoria's divorce attorney, rose shakily. The usually composed man looked haggard, his silver hair disheveled as if he'd been running his hands through it all morning. Your Honor, I've been unable to reach Mrs. Sterling since yesterday evening. Her phone goes directly to voicemail, and she's not at her residence. We are deeply concerned for her well-being. Marcus felt a familiar flash of irritation, sharp and bitter. Concerned? This was Victoria's style, always the dramatics, always the perfectly timed emotional manipulation. She knew the prenuptial agreement was bulletproof. His team had spent months crafting it into an impenetrable fortress. She was entitled to a generous settlement, certainly, but not the astronomical sum she demanded. Not half of everything he had built. This vanishing act was her nuclear option, a desperate play for sympathy that would backfire spectacularly. He could already see the headlines. Unstable heiress abandons divorce proceedings. The media would eat it alive. A subtle movement in the gallery caught his attention. In the third row, Celeste Winters sat with the poise of a Renaissance sculpture, her honey-blonde hair swept into an elegant chignon. She wore a midnight blue dress that complemented her luminous skin, and when their eyes met, she gave him the faintest shake of her head, a gesture that said, "See? I told you she was unstable." The corner of Celeste's lips curved in what might have been sympathy to any observer, but Marcus recognized it for what it was, vindication. For months she had warned him about Victoria's fragile emotional state, her tendency toward dramatic gestures. Celeste had been his anchor through the storm of his disintegrating marriage, the voice of reason when Victoria's demands became increasingly unreasonable. Their affair had begun innocently enough, a chance meeting at a gallery opening where Celeste was curating an exhibition on disruptive art in the digital age. She had approached him with confidence that bordered on audacity, her whiskey-colored eyes sparkling with intelligence as she discussed the intersection of technology and human expression. She didn't see him as Victoria's husband or an expectant father. She saw him as Marcus Sterling, the visionary who had revolutionized data analytics. "You don't just build companies," she had whispered during their first intimate evening in his penthouse, her lips brushing against his ear as city lights painted shadows across her naked skin. "You create the future. That's what makes you magnificent." Victoria had never spoken to him that way. His wife preferred quiet evenings with poetry books and classical music. Her idea of passion involving discussions about charitable foundations and prenatal yoga. Celeste was fire to Victoria's ice, ambition to her contentment, hunger to her satisfaction. The confession had been the hardest thing Marcus had ever done. He remembered Victoria's reaction, not the explosive anger he had expected, but something far worse, profound, soul-deep disappointment. She had sat perfectly still in their Fifth Avenue penthouse, her hands resting protectively on her rounded belly, her dark eyes reflecting a pain that cut deeper than any scream. "I see," she had said quietly, her voice hollow. "And the baby?" "The baby will be provided for," he had replied, the words sounding clinical even to his own ears. "You both will be." "Handsomely." Victoria had repeated the word handsomely, as if it tasted of ashes, as if she were calculating the precise monetary value of her broken heart. From that moment, the gentle woman who had organized charity galas and read him poetry in bed had transformed into someone he barely recognized, strategist with steel in her spine and ice in her veins. "Mr. Sterling." Judge Hartwell's sharp voice yanked him back to the present. "Given the extraordinary circumstances and the possibility that your wife may be a missing person, I have no choice but to postpone these proceedings." She leaned forward, her piercing gaze pinning him to his chair. "However, let me be absolutely clear. If this is discovered to be a manipulation of this court's time and resources, the consequences for all parties involved will be severe." The unspoken accusation hung in the air like smoke. The media vultures circling outside would have a field day with this development. Marcus Sterling, the man who had built an empire on precision and control, couldn't even manage to get his own wife to show up for her own divorce. "Court is adjourned for 2 weeks," Judge Hartwell declared, her gavel falling with a finality that echoed through the silent room. As the judge swept from the courtroom, Marcus's lead attorney, Harrison Wade, leaned close. "This is a disaster, Marcus. A complete PR nightmare. The stock price is already dropping." "Find her," Marcus hissed, his voice low and dangerous. "I don't care what it costs or what strings you have to pull. This isn't a game anymore." He stood, buttoning his charcoal suit jacket with mechanical precision, his mask of composed authority sliding back into place. As he turned to leave, his gaze swept over the gallery one final time. Celeste was already standing, her expression one of perfect concern for the cameras that would undoubtedly be waiting outside. She mouthed the words, "Are you okay?" But Marcus found his attention drawn inexorably back to that empty chair at the plaintiff's table. The irritation that had sustained him through the morning was rapidly being replaced by something else, a cold, creeping dread that coiled in his stomach like a serpent. Victoria wasn't dramatic. She was methodical, analytical, precise. Everything she did served a purpose, followed a plan. If she wasn't here, it wasn't because she was hiding in some spa resort charging revenge purchases to his black card. It was because she was playing a game he didn't even know had started. As Marcus walked out of the courthouse into the blinding flash of cameras and the cacophony of shouted questions, Celeste's satisfied smile burned in his memory. But for the first time in months, he found himself wondering not what his lover was thinking, but what his wife was planning. A game, he realized with dawning horror, was far from over. The first 48 hours after Victoria's disappearance unfolded like a carefully choreographed dance of deception. Marcus Sterling found himself in the unfamiliar position of being a suspect in his own life, every word scrutinized, every gesture analyzed for hidden meaning. Detective Rachel Morrison sat across from him in the sterile conference room of the 19th Precinct, her weathered face betraying nothing as she flipped through her notepad. At 43, she had seen enough missing persons cases to know the difference between a genuine mystery and a staged disappearance. The problem was, she couldn't yet determine which category Victoria Ashworth fell into. "Walk me through Tuesday." "Evening again, Mr. Sterling," Detective Morrison said, her voice carrying the weight of 2 decades on the force. "The last time you spoke with your wife." Marcus leaned back in his chair, projecting the confidence of a man with nothing to hide. I called her around 7 p.m. to confirm our meeting with the mediator for Thursday. She seemed agitated, emotional. She's been under tremendous stress with the pregnancy and the divorce proceedings. Agitated how? She accused me of trying to manipulate the custody arrangements. Sighed, I was underestimating her. Marcus paused, allowing a flicker of what might have been genuine concern to cross his features. Victoria has always been intense, but lately she's been increasingly paranoid. Her sister Nina can tell you, Victoria's been convinced everyone is plotting against her. Detective Morrison made a note. And where were you Tuesday evening? At the Museum of Contemporary Art's fundraising gala, with Celeste Winters. We arrived at 8 and stayed until nearly midnight. There are photographs, witness statements, security footage. Indeed, there were. The society pages had captured them beautifully. Marcus in his tailored tuxedo, Celeste radiant in champagne silk, their poses suggesting a couple completely at ease with public scrutiny. Celeste had been brilliant that evening, charming donors and board members while subtly positioning herself as the supportive partner to a man dealing with a difficult personal situation. She's been my rock through all of this, Marcus had told the assembled crowd during his brief remarks. Sometimes life tests us in ways we never expect, but having someone who believes in you makes all the difference. The cameras had loved it. Celeste's hand resting gently on his arm, her smile warm but not triumphant, her demeanor perfectly calibrated to suggest concern rather than celebration. She had played her part flawlessly, but it was Nina Ashworth who proved to be the wild card in Marcus's carefully constructed narrative. Victoria's sister arrived at the police station like a storm system, her dark hair whipping around her face, her investigative journalist instincts in full predator mode. At 31, Nina had built her reputation on exposing corporate corruption and political scandals. She had no patience for Marcus's performance of concerned husband. He's lying, she announced to Detective Morrison without preamble, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being heard. My sister isn't. Paranoid, she's thorough. If Victoria suspected something, it's because there was something to suspect. Ms. Ashworth, Detective Morrison began diplomatically, I understand you're upset. I'm not upset, I'm furious. And I'm right. Nina slammed a manila folder onto the desk. I've been investigating Marcus Sterling for 3 months, ever since. Victoria first mentioned divorce. Do you know what I found? The folder contained printouts of financial records, corporate filings, and what appeared to be surveillance photographs. Nina spread them across the desk like a poker player, revealing a winning hand. Sterling Dynamics didn't just happen to become successful, Nina continued, her voice gaining momentum. 10 years ago, Marcus systematically destroyed Ashworth Pharmaceuticals, our father's company. He used insider information to undercut our research patents, then swooped in to buy the technology at bankruptcy prices. My father died of a heart attack 6 months later, and Victoria inherited nothing but debt. Detective Morrison studied the documents, her expression neutral. These are serious accusations. They're not accusations, they're facts. And here's the beautiful part. Victoria figured it out. She's been quietly building a case against her own husband for months. She didn't just want half his company in the divorce. She wanted to expose how he built it in the first place. The revelation hit Marcus like a physical blow. He had been so focused on Victoria's emotional state, so convinced of his own intellectual superiority, that he had never considered she might be conducting her own investigation. The quiet evenings when she claimed to be reading poetry, had she been researching him instead? Dr. James Rivera, Victoria's obstetrician, provided another piece of the puzzle when Detective Morrison interviewed him later that day. The soft-spoken physician had been treating Victoria throughout her pregnancy, and his concerns ran deeper than missed appointments. "Mrs. Sterling is one of my most conscientious patients," Dr. Rivera explained, his accent carrying traces of his Puerto Rican heritage. "She tracks every vitamin, every symptom, every milestone. She was excited about this baby in a way that ... Well, it didn't match the narrative of a woman planning to disappear." "What do you mean?" "She scheduled extra appointments for next week. She wanted to discuss birthing plans, pediatrician recommendations. She was planning for a future, not an exit." The most damning evidence came from Elena Santos, Victoria's housekeeper, and the woman who knew her daily routines better than anyone. Elena had worked for the Ashworth family for 15 years, first for Victoria's father, then for Victoria herself. Her loyalty was absolute, her observations devastating. "Miss Victoria, she never leave without telling me," Elena insisted in. Her careful English, her weathered hands twisting a dish towel as she spoke. Every trip, every appointment, she write on the calendar. But Tuesday morning, she was different. Different how? Excited. Like she had big secret. She spent long time on computer, printing papers, making phone calls. She packed small bag, very careful. Not like running away, like going on business trip. Elena led Detective Morrison through Victoria's pristine apartment, each room a testament to its owner's meticulous nature. The pregnancy books were carefully bookmarked, the nursery half prepared but organized with military precision. On the kitchen counter sat the abandoned prenatal vitamins, a single pill beside the open bottle like a question mark. "She never miss these," Elena said firmly. "Never. Something happened to stop her, but not something bad. Something ... planned." That evening, as Marcus returned to his penthouse, he found Celeste waiting for him with champagne and sympathy. She had changed from her daytime attire into something more intimate, a silk robe that clung to her curves, her hair loose around her shoulders like spun gold. "Darling," she murmured, pressing herself against him as he entered. "You look exhausted. Let me take care of you." Her lips found his neck, her hands working at his tie with practiced efficiency. For a moment, Marcus allowed himself to sink into the familiar comfort of her embrace. The warmth of her body against his a welcome distraction from the chaos of his day. "The police asked me about Tuesday night," Celeste whispered against his ear. "I told them we never left each other's sight. We're each other's alibi." Something in her tone made Marcus pull back to look at her face. There was satisfaction there. He realized not just the satisfaction of a lover providing comfort, but something deeper. Something that looked suspiciously like triumph. "What did you tell them exactly?" he asked. Celeste's smile was radiant. "The truth. That we arrived together, stayed together, and left together. That you were the perfect gentleman all evening, charming the donors and making them forget all about the scandalous divorce proceedings." She traced a finger along his jaw. "I also mentioned how worried you've been about Victoria's emotional state. How you've been walking on eggshells, afraid she might do something drastic." "Drastic?" "Well, she is 7 months pregnant and facing a very public divorce. The stress could make anyone unstable, especially someone with a family history of mental health issues." Marcus frowned. "Victoria doesn't have a family history of mental health issues." Celeste's laugh was like silver bells. "Darling, her father died of a heart attack brought on by stress and financial ruin. Her mother spent years on antidepressants after his death. Victoria herself has been seeing a therapist since the separation began. It's not a stretch to suggest she might be ... fragile." The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. Celeste hadn't just been providing him with an alibi. She had been constructing a narrative. A story in which Victoria was the unstable wife, driven to desperate measures by her own psychological fragility. A story in which Marcus was the long-suffering husband, supported by his devoted girlfriend through an impossible situation. But as Marcus looked into Celeste's beautiful face, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was seeing only the surface of a much deeper game. Victoria was missing. Nina was asking dangerous questions, and the woman in his arms had answers that were just a little too perfect. The hunt for Victoria Ashworth had only just begun, but Marcus was starting to realize that the question wasn't just where she had gone. The question was who was really pulling the strings. The letter arrived on a Friday morning, delivered by a courier who disappeared into Manhattan traffic before Marcus could ask questions. The envelope bore the letterhead of Brannan and Associates, but its weight suggested more than routine legal correspondence. Marcus stood in his glass office overlooking Central Park, his hands unsteady as he broke the seal. Inside were two documents, a formal legal filing and a smaller piece of cream paper folded in half. The first document made his blood run cold. Victoria was formally withdrawing her divorce petition and relinquishing all claims to Sterling Dynamics. After months of brutal legal warfare, she was surrendering everything: the settlement, custody arrangements, even her accusations of infidelity. It was complete capitulation. But why? After hiring the most aggressive divorce attorney in the city, after demands that would have devastated his empire, Victoria was simply walking away? It defied everything he knew about her methodical nature. The second paper was addressed in Victoria's elegant handwriting, the same script that had once penned love letters during their courtship. Now it felt like a message from beyond the grave. He unfolded it with trembling fingers. One sentence, but it shattered his world. I know about the Phoenix Initiative. Forgive me for what I must do. The Phoenix Initiative. Marcus hadn't heard that name in 12 years. It was buried so deep in Sterling Dynamics corporate archaeology that he'd convinced himself it no longer existed. But Victoria had somehow excavated it from the graveyard of his past sins. 12 years ago, Marcus had been a hungry young entrepreneur, with more ambition than capital. Dr. William Ashworth, Victoria's father, had been developing revolutionary nanotechnology for targeted drug delivery. The applications were limitless: cancer treatment, genetic therapy, even enhanced human performance. Their partnership had begun with handshakes and shared dreams sketched on coffee shop napkins. Ashworth provided the genius. Marcus would handle the business side. It should have been perfect. Instead, it became Marcus's original sin. While Ashworth focused on humanitarian applications, Marcus saw the technology's military potential. He began secret negotiations with defense contractors, filing patents under subsidiary companies Ashworth knew nothing about. When the Pentagon offered a $1 billion contract for weapons-grade nanobots, Marcus made his choice. He triggered a series of calculated business moves that left Ashworth Pharmaceuticals financially vulnerable, then orchestrated a hostile takeover. In one devastating week, he acquired the Phoenix technology for pennies on the dollar, leaving William Ashworth with nothing but the knowledge that his closest partner had betrayed him. Ashworth died of a heart attack 6 months later. The official cause was genetic predisposition, but Marcus knew better. He had murdered the man's spirit, stolen his life's work, and built an empire on the foundation of that betrayal. The intercom buzzed. "Mr. Sterling, Julian Cross is here." "He says, urgent." Julian Cross was the private investigator Marcus had hired to find Victoria. His expression suggested this wasn't a routine update. "We have a problem," Julian said, settling into the chair across from Marcus's desk. "About your wife. About Celeste Winters. About connections I've discovered that change everything." Julian opened his tablet, revealing a photograph of Celeste with an older man, distinguished, silver-haired, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Dr. Benjamin Torres," Julian explained. "Professor Emeritus at Columbia, Celeste's doctoral advisor. He's also the man who co-authored 17 research papers with Dr. William Ashworth between 1995 and 2010. Marcus felt ice form in his veins. They knew each other. They were best friends. Torres was the one who introduced Ashworth to his future wife at a conference in Geneva. He was Victoria's godfather, though she apparently lost touch with him after her father's death. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. Celeste didn't just happen to meet me at that gallery opening. She researched you for months. Julian confirmed. Studied your schedule, your preferences, your psychological profile. She positioned herself to be exactly where you'd be most vulnerable to her particular brand of charm. Marcus thought back to their first meeting, how Celeste had seemed to know exactly what to say about art and technology, how she'd understood his vision for the future. Every conversation, every intimate moment, every whispered encouragement had been calculated. There's more, Julian continued. Torres never believed the official story about Ashworth's death. He spent years investigating, documenting irregularities in the Phoenix Initiative acquisition. He couldn't prove anything legally, but he never forgot. And when his student grew up, he told her everything about the brilliant scientist who was betrayed by his partner, about the daughter left orphaned by corporate greed, about the man who built an empire on stolen dreams. Marcus stared at the photograph, seeing Celeste's deception laid bare. She's been planning this for years, since she was 22 and writing her dissertation on corporate espionage in the digital age. She's been preparing for this moment, learning everything about you, waiting for the perfect opportunity to strike. The phone on Marcus's desk rang. The caller ID showed his lawyer's number. Marcus. Harrison Wade's voice was tight with panic. We have a situation. The SEC has opened an investigation into Sterling Dynamics acquisition practices. They're specifically looking at the Phoenix Initiative. What? Marcus felt the room spinning. How is that possible? Someone filed a complaint 6 months ago, alleging that the company was built on stolen intellectual property. They have documentation, correspondence, technical specifications, everything needed to build a case for corporate fraud. Who filed the complaint? That's the problem. The complaint was filed anonymously, but it required access to classified documents that should have been destroyed years ago. Whoever did this had inside knowledge of the Phoenix acquisition. Marcus ended the call and looked at Julian. Victoria. She's been building a case against me. It's worse than that, Julian said grimly. I think she's been building a case against Celeste too. He pulled up another series of photographs on his tablet surveillance images of Celeste entering various locations around the city. Your wife had both of you under surveillance for months. She knew about the affair, obviously, but she also knew about Celeste's connection to Dr. Torres. She was documenting everything, the revenge plot, the seduction, the manipulation. But why? If she had evidence to destroy me, why didn't she use it? Julian's expression was thoughtful. Maybe because she wasn't trying to destroy you. Maybe she was trying to save you. Marcus's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. The game ends tomorrow. Riverside Park, Bethesda Fountain, 3 p.m. Come alone, or the SEE gets everything. Marcus showed the message to Julian, who whistled low. She's been orchestrating this entire scenario. The disappearance, the dropped divorce petition, the cryptic note, it's all been leading to this moment. But what does she want? I think, Julian said slowly, she wants to give you a choice between facing the consequences of your actions and making them right. As Marcus stared out at the city he had conquered through deception and betrayal, he realized that he had been playing the wrong game all along. He had thought this was about adultery and divorce, about corporate maneuvering and legal strategy. But Victoria had been playing chess while he was playing checkers. She had seen the entire board, anticipated every move, and positioned herself for a checkmate that would either destroy him or redeem him. The question was, which would he choose? As the sun set over Manhattan, casting long shadows across his office, Marcus Sterling prepared to face the consequences of the Phoenix Initiative. The ghost he had thought buried was rising from the grave, and his wife, the woman he had underestimated and betrayed, held the key to his salvation or his destruction. The game was about to reach its endgame, and Marcus was finally beginning to understand that he had never been the player he thought he was. He had been a pawn in Victoria's grand design, and now it was time to discover whether she intended to sacrifice him or promote him to something greater. The Phoenix Initiative was about to rise from the ashes of his deception, and Marcus could only hope that he would survive the flames. Marcus confronted Celeste that evening in the penthouse they had shared for 6 months. The space that had once felt like a sanctuary, now seeming like a beautifully appointed prison. She was in the kitchen, moving with the fluid grace of a dancer. As she prepared dinner, her honey-blonde hair catching the light from the crystal chandelier above. "We need to talk," he said, his voice carrying a cold authority that made her pause mid-motion. Celeste turned, a wine glass in her hand, her smile as radiant as ever. "Of course, darling. You look tense. Was it the meeting with that investigator? I told you hiring him was unnecessary. I know who you are." The words hung in the air between them like a blade. For just a moment, Celeste's perfect mask slipped, revealing something sharp and dangerous beneath the surface. But she recovered. Quickly, her laugh a silvery cascade that might have fooled anyone who wasn't watching for it. "I'm not sure what you mean," she said, moving closer to him with the predatory grace of a cat. "I'm exactly who I've always been. The woman who loves you, who stood by you through all of this chaos with Victoria." "Benjamin Torres," Marcus said simply. "Dr. Torres, your mentor at Yale, William Ashworth's colleague and friend. The man who delivered his eulogy and never forgot the circumstances of his death." This time, the mask didn't slip, it shattered. Celeste's face went through a series of rapid transformations. Surprise, calculation, and finally, a cold satisfaction. That was more terrifying than any rage. "Well," she said, setting down her wine glass with deliberate care, "I suppose we're done pretending." The woman who had been his lover for 6 months seemed to shed her skin like a snake, revealing someone Marcus had never truly known. Her posture straightened, her expression hardened, and when she spoke again, her voice carried an edge that could cut glass. "You want to know who I am? I'm the daughter of the man whose life you destroyed. Not literally, my father is a perfectly healthy insurance adjuster in Chicago. But Dr. Torres was like a father to me, and William Ashworth was like a grandfather. They were brilliant, ethical men who believed in using science to help people, not to build empires." She began to pace, her movements now predatory rather than seductive. "Do you know what it's like to watch someone you love fade away from grief? To see a man who once revolutionized pharmaceutical research reduced to a broken shell because someone he trusted betrayed him?" "The Meridian Project was theft," Celeste snapped. "Pure and simple. You took advantage of a good man's trust, stole his life's work, and left him to die of a broken heart. And then you built an empire on the foundation of his corpse." Marcus felt a mixture of anger and grudging admiration. "So you seduced me, convinced me to leave my wife, to expose myself to a divorce that would have revealed everything. It was all revenge." "It was justice," Celeste corrected. "Dr. Torres spent years investigating William's death, documenting the paper trail, gathering evidence. But by the time he had enough to prove what you'd done, the statute of limitations had expired. There was no legal recourse, no way to make you pay for what you'd stolen. So you decided to make me pay another way." Celeste's smile was razor sharp. I decided to give you exactly what you deserved. Public humiliation, financial ruin, the destruction of everything you'd built on William's grave. The divorce would have been perfect, all your dirty laundry aired in open court, your reputation destroyed, your empire crumbling. But Victoria disappeared. Yes, Celeste said, and for the first time, genuine frustration crept into her voice. Your brilliant wife figured out what I was doing and decided to play her own game. She vanished before the trial could begin, taking with her the legal mechanism that would have exposed you. Marcus studied her face, seeing the truth there. You don't know where she is. I know she's alive, Celeste replied. I know she's planning something. And I know she's been watching both of us for months, collecting evidence, building her own case. The question is, what does she want? As if summoned by their conversation, Marcus's phone rang. The caller ID showed Julian. Cross's number. Marcus, the investigator's voice was tight with urgency. I've found something. Victoria's been in contact with someone, a former Ashworth Pharmaceuticals employee named Dr. Jennifer Walsh. She's been hiding at a private medical facility on Long Island, the same place where Dr. Walsh works. A medical facility? It's a high-end private clinic that specializes in high-risk pregnancies. Marcus, I think Victoria's been planning to give birth there, away from public scrutiny, away from the media circus. But there's something else. Dr. Walsh has connections to the D. She's been cooperating with a federal investigation into pharmaceutical patent fraud. The blood drained from Marcus's face. Federal investigation? The Meridian Project, Marcus. Someone filed a complaint with the federal authorities 6 months ago, alleging that Sterling Dynamics was built on stolen intellectual property. They've been building a case, and if they have enough evidence, they could seize everything, Marcus finished. The company, the assets, everything. Celeste was listening to the conversation with growing alarm. Who filed the complaint? She demanded. Julian's voice was grim. That's what I'm trying to figure out. But whoever it was, they had access to detailed financial records, correspondence, and technical specifications dating back to the original Meridian project. They knew exactly where to look and what to look for. Marcus ended the call and stared at Celeste. You said Dr. Torres had been investigating for years. Did he ever contact federal authorities? No, Celeste said slowly. He was too much of a gentleman, too concerned about proof and due process. He would never have filed a complaint without absolute certainty. Then who? The answer came to Marcus in a flash of terrible clarity. Victoria. She filed the complaint. She's been working with the federal authorities all along. Celeste's eyes widened. That's impossible. She's your wife. She'd be destroying her own financial future. Unless she never intended to profit from the divorce, Marcus said, the pieces falling into place. Unless her goal was never to take half my company, but to make sure I couldn't keep it. The full scope of Victoria's strategy became clear. She had never wanted his money or his empire. She had wanted justice for her father, and she had been willing to sacrifice everything, her marriage, her financial security, her comfortable life, to get it. The disappearance, the dropped divorce petition, the cryptic note, it had all been designed to buy time, to allow the federal investigation to proceed without the complications of a public divorce trial. By vanishing, Victoria had protected both the investigation and herself, ensuring that when the government moved against Sterling Dynamics, she would be seen as a victim rather than a co-conspirator. She's been playing us against each other, Marcus said wonderingly. She knew about your connection to Dr. Torres, knew you were planning to destroy me through the divorce. So she let you seduce me, let you push me toward divorce, knowing that the federal investigation would be more effective than any court proceeding. Celeste's face was pale. And now? Now she's ready to finish the game. Marcus looked at his phone. remembering the text message about meeting at Pier 47. She's going to give me a choice: surrender everything voluntarily, or watch as the federal authorities seize it all. What are you going to do? Marcus looked at the woman who had been his lover and his enemy, who had played him perfectly until his own wife had outplayed them both. I'm going to meet her. I'm going to find out what she really wants. And if she wants everything, Marcus smiled grimly, then I'll give it to her, because Victoria Ashworth has earned it. As he prepared to leave for what might be his final confrontation with his wife, Marcus realized that he had been wrong about everything. He had thought he was the hunter, stalking through the corporate jungle with predatory instincts. But he had been the prey all along, and the gentlest person in his life had been the most dangerous predator of all. The game was about to end, and Marcus was beginning to understand that he had never stood a chance of winning. Pier 47 jutted into the Hudson River like an accusing finger, its weathered planks slick with morning mist. Marcus arrived 5 minutes early, his usual power suit replaced by jeans and a leather jacket, a man trying to blend in rather than dominate. The city skyline rose behind him, a testament to the empire he had built and was about to lose. Victoria was already there, standing at the end of the pier with her back to him, her silhouette unmistakable despite the months that had passed. She wore a simple gray coat that couldn't quite hide her advanced pregnancy, her dark hair pulled back in the same elegant chignon she had favored since their college days. "Hello, Marcus," she said without turning around. "Thank you for coming alone. Where else would I be?" He replied, moving to stand beside her. "You've orchestrated this entire symphony. I'm just an instrument in your orchestra." Victoria smiled, her profile serene in the morning light. "You always were dramatic. I suppose that's what drew me to you in the first place. Your ability to make everything seem larger than life. Even our marriage? Especially our marriage." She turned to face him, and Marcus was struck by how radiant she looked. Pregnancy had given her a glow that transcended her physical beauty, an inner strength that made her seem almost luminous. "I loved you, Marcus. I loved you more than I thought it was possible to love another human being." "Past tense?" "Past tense," she confirmed. "The man I loved died when I found out about the Meridian Project. What's left is just ... architecture. Impressive, but hollow." They stood in silence for a moment, watching the river flow toward the harbor. Finally, Marcus spoke. "How long have you known? About my father's real cause of death? About what you did to him? Or about Celeste's identity and her plans for revenge? All of it." Victoria's laugh was soft, almost musical. "I suspected something was wrong with our marriage long before I discovered the affair. You were different, distant, preoccupied, guilty. I thought it was just the stress of expanding the company. Then I found some old correspondence of my father's. Letters he'd written to colleagues about his partnership with Sterling Dynamics. Letters that painted a very different picture of your relationship than the one you'd given me. So you investigated. I investigated everything. Your business practices, your financial records, your past acquisitions. It took me 3 months to piece together the full scope of what you'd done to the Meridian Project. And once I knew that, I started watching you more carefully." Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the river breeze. "You've been surveilling me." "I've been protecting myself," Victoria corrected. "When I realized that my husband was capable of destroying a man who trusted him, I needed to understand what else he might be capable of. That's when I noticed the patterns in your behavior, the late nights, the mysterious phone calls, the way you looked at other women. Celeste was obvious once I knew what to look for. A beautiful woman with convenient connections to the art world, appearing in your life just as our marriage was getting difficult. But it was her background check that made everything clear." Victoria reached into her coat and withdrew a tablet, scrolling through what appeared to be an extensive dossier. Celeste Winters, protege of Dr. Benjamin Torres, who was my father's closest friend and colleague. The same Dr. Torres who spent years investigating my father's death, who believed you had stolen his life's work. You knew she was playing me. I knew she was playing both of us. She wanted to destroy you through a public divorce, using me as her unwitting weapon. But she made a critical error. She underestimated how much I loved you, and how far I would go to protect you from yourself. Marcus stared at his wife, seeing her clearly for perhaps the first time in years. The federal investigation. You filed the complaint. I filed the complaint because justice demanded it. But I also structured it to protect you as much as possible. If you cooperate voluntarily, if you make restitution to the families affected by,